Well, at ease, paratroopers. If you like that reference from HBO's hit series Band of Brothers, you're going to like this podcast. My name is Kevin Kidder, and after 20 years in the Army, I discovered something unexpected. The toughest battles weren't behind me, they were just different. This is the Enduring Mindset Podcast. In our inaugural season, The Invisible Veteran, we'll explore what it really takes to reclaim purpose, rebuild identity, and restore connection after service. This podcast isn't just for veterans, it's for anyone navigating transition leaders, spouses, teammates, anyone asking, who am I now and what comes next? Each week, I'll share lessons from my journey, stories from others who walk similar paths, and tools to help you build what I call an enduring mindset, one forged through adversity, guided by purpose, and grounded in service to others. Before we dive in, I just want to thank you for being here. I know there are literally thousands of other things you could be listening to, and the fact you chose this podcast means a lot. My hope is that you walk away each week with something useful, a story, a reminder, or even a little encouragement. So today's conversation has me really pumped up. My guest today is Lincy Maldonado. She's a nurse practitioner and a captain in the Army Reserves. She has worked across the military care continuum on active duty at active duty installations with the VA and is currently focused on VA exams. Her passion is translating military medicine into practical, compassionate care. Lincy exudes and embodies compassion. When she's not engrossed in the medical field, she finds ways to help others, including setting up a bone marrow donation program in Kuwait and participating in the state of Arizona's 2024 Dancing with the Stars, which raised nearly $500,000 to benefit the patient services and programs of the National Kidney Foundation of Arizona. This is my conversation with Lincy Maldonado. Yo, what up? So glad to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm really excited for today's conversation as we get back-to-back women, female veteran guests on the show. And women veterans are such an underrepresented and underexplored demographic, yet wildly important. You and I have only known each other for a few years, but we play best supporting actor in each other's lives due to mutual friends, and the most important being my wife, Caitlin.
Yes, she is.
And you guys met when she was 19, and I won't divulge how old you or she is, but it was 2 decades ago. So, listeners, you do the math. I always like to share a story about my guests so the listener can anticipate and understand, or I'm sorry, appreciate and understand why you're here. So my story is two parts. Um, in 2022, Caitlin and I had been dating for about 6 months, and you came out to Michigan for Thanksgiving for the Lions game. We were hosting, and we went to the Lions game, and I'm sure you were like, "Who is this chubby guy with the receding hairline and silver and Honolulu blue all over his face? Like, Caitlin must be nuts." And we went to the game. We had a great time. And then we came back and we had Thanksgiving dinner at my house. And, my dad, my brothers were there. And my youngest brother has Down syndrome. And I just remember your interaction with him, with Jordan. Some people are nervous, they're standoffish, or the other end of the spectrum, they're overly eager and polite. They do the high pitched voice like when talking to a dog or a baby. And you were perfect. You treated him just as he should be, which is like another human being, just a fun dude at the dinner table. And I know I appreciated that. And I think my family did too.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
I definitely see why Caitlin loved you so much. It made sense of everything that she spoke about you, and I got to see it in person, and that's why she loves you so very much.
Well, thank you. And then it kind of segued where she had her Christmas party at her house at the shores. And I think right before the Christmas party, you guys kidnapped my daughter. So she would have been 12, 13 at the time. And I hadn't really let her like go with a stranger, if you will, for the night. But obviously I trusted Caitlin implicitly and obviously made a great choice because they are thick as thieves. She calls Juliana her broke best friend. But as I reflect back on those moments, it's just so crystal clear that you are a very generous, thoughtful person with a big heart.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we're going to get to your question here. In April, I was attending a conference in Los Angeles and we had breakout sessions. And the first breakout session I went to was held by Brett Ledbetter. He's a mental performance coach and author, speaker. And his session was the power of asking better questions. And at the end of the breakout, he plugs his new book, 365 Questions Getting to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. And I knew when I started the podcast, I wanted to take Brett's recommendation and make it my own, which is whenever I have a guest, I'm going to have them pick a number between 1 and 365, ask them the question for the first time during the podcast so you get a real, unscripted, authentic answer. So here we go. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Most of his questions are two parts. So part one is thinking back over the last year. When have you thought about something significant in your life and asked yourself in disbelief, how did this happen?
Okay. That's a tough one. Last year was a tough year. So I think I had a situation with a neighbor, and sometimes kindness can be taken the wrong way when you're trying to help everyone around. And it kind of put me in a dangerous situation, and kind of forgetting as a woman that I really need to be aware of my surroundings and who I share information with. So that was a very eye opening experience, and something that, always sharing with younger women that, like, you do have to protect yourself. You do have to think, you know, not that everyone's evil or wrong, but there's always a chance. And I have wonderful support systems and people that I leaned on. Actually, I leaned on you during this situation, and I'm so grateful for that. But really knowing who in your life matters and kind of just listening to your gut. And I kind of didn't do that.
Wow. The second part to that is when that happens, what prevents you from accepting reality faster? Or what are the patterns or behavior that cause you to ask yourself, how did this happen?
I think the biggest thing is feeling comfortable about listening to the gut. Like, I think we hear it so like a whisper, or it comes by like as a tap on the shoulder, and we don't think anything of it because you're like, no, that can't be right. Because as a younger self, it's hard to trust yourself because you don't have as many life experiences to give that confirmation bias. Like, I know that my gut has been right. But as I get older, I'm like, every time I've listened to my gut and been like, something feels off, something feels weird. And it's just that kind of like twinge of like, I'm not okay with that. Really leaning into that, because 99% of the time, that has been right. And many times, every time I haven't listened to my gut, or I thought it was like, oh, this is something that's, well, we'll just see how it goes. It's not a big deal. Or that's where I put myself in situations that are dangerous or not safe or not the best, like in my journey or path. So it's really being comfortable of like listening and taking that step back to be like, is this off? Is this vibe off? Is this feeling off? And sticking with it.
But yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think, especially in the female demographic, there's almost a hesitation to be considered rude before trusting your gut. You'll be called a bitch or difficult or something like that. And, I was raised by wonderful parents, but that concept wasn't really addressed. And then I played sports and I was in the military, and I didn't learn it until I had a daughter.
Mhm.
And I was years into law enforcement with being an MP, and I saw stuff and I was like, wow, this this is ridiculous. If a woman is assertive or even aggressive and saying no, which is a complete sentence, by the way, if you listen to your gut or thanks but no, whatever, you run the risk of, being degraded or shamed or name called simply for saying no, which I think is absurd. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great point.
I think as women, we're taught to smile, don't take space, don't speak. You need to be present. And it's kind of taught in us, like, not a people pleasing sense. It's like that is kind of the subconscious tone that's given to us. And to take up space, to speak up and say, like, I'm not okay with this is
Mhm.
something that really needs to be taught to younger women and girls, that no, if you don't feel right, like, you leave. Like, this is not the place to be. Or if something's happening, you need to have the voice to stick up and say something.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, share with the listeners, talk to us about growing up, your journey, and what led you to join the military.
Absolutely. So I'm a Midwest girl as well. So I'm from Waukegan, Illinois. My parents moved a lot growing up. I think my mother didn't like weather, so we kind of checked out all the parts of the United States. Kind of moved around every 3 years. You would have I kind of PCSed early, so I was prepared for this. They're like, "Are you an army brat?" And I was like, "No, my mother doesn't like weather." So I think I was kind of preparing for this life early on. Kind of lived all over the place, Florida, Arizona, back to Florida, Arizona. Wild feeling to learn Spanish and lived in Argentina, but ended up planting roots in Arizona. After that, I became a nurse. I went to nursing school, and then I worked in the burn unit in Maricopa County here in Arizona. There I was introduced to someone who invited me on a mission trip to Haiti during that earthquake relief. And that's where I really was my first encounter of people in the military, because I have no one in my life that's in the military. And we were on the mission trip, and one of the tents ended up catching on fire. Like, who plans for that? Like, I remember learning in school what to do for a fire. There was like an acronym, but I was like, I'll never have to do that. At that time, I definitely wish I knew the acronym, because that was really scary situation, like running from fire.
Oh, I
But
bet.
it happened to be like an Air Force that I think they were doing a mission out there, and they came and helped us. So they were pretty much the reason why there wasn't casualties. We were able to get back into mission status, and I was just so grateful. And that was where I was kind of like, my eyes were open, and they were like, you could do this, like you could help people, because it's kind of hard to do those mission trips outside of the country. They're like, this is something you can do, this is what we do. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. And it was right shortly after that is when I went and met with a recruiter. I actually ended up started with the Air Force, and then kind of tried out, see, and they didn't need my job, and then ended up going with the Army and went with the Army Reserves. And I had a lot of people, a lot of nurses in my life that were Air Force Reserves, Navy Reserves, but no one that I knew that was Army Reserves. And I will tell you one thing, Army Reserves is a different beast. Like, we are in it, we're doing it. So I was put in a unit in an MSU here in Arizona, so a medical unit. And then it took a while to actually get commissioned. So I even changed like my career. I think I changed my height, and I think even my eye color changed in the process. I don't know. It was like a really long time to get commissioned, and to the point where I like forgot about it. It was like several years back. They're like, "Do you want to commission for the Army?" I was like, I guess. So kind of happened. I think the timing was exactly when it needed to be. And I commissioned as a nurse practitioner. And then for several years, I just kind of did the reserve thing. And I did kind of the 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year, and did some active, like some local stuff, nothing crazy. And then after COVID, as working as a nurse practitioner, I was actually at the VA, and then I got activated for the COVID mission. So this was my first activation, first being put on active duty orders, and I was sent to Fort Bliss, El Paso. And then I was working at the SRP mission, working with the deployment and the mobilization process. So that was definitely something different than I've ever done. Working with, soldiers coming and going, working with the medical process. So there's so much I got to learn through that. And then got the Army bug at that point. I was like, I want to be in this and do it. So right shortly after, I signed up for a mission. I volunteered to go to Kuwait, and then came back in 2023, and I came home. And it was one of those things where I'm a little older. I commissioned into the military older. So I'm in my late 30s. And it was one of those things, I have to say, as a woman, you kind of have to decide, like, do I want military or family? It's kind of hard. Like, there's a window of
Yeah.
time that you have to really make that decision. And I kind of made that decision where I was like, I really want to focus on the opportunity of creating a family, put Army on the, appetizer plate right now, not on the main dish. And then I focused on that, and I found an opportunity to work because I've kind of done every sector of the military, worked in the VA, worked in active duty, worked in reservists. And then I got to do VA disability. So now I'm working with veterans. So I'm working in that um, CMP experience, and it's given me the opportunity where I could balance Army life, family opportunities, and still get to have an impact on veterans. So I did pretty much everything except MEPS, because MEPS you have to wake up way too early. I was going to do it. They're like, you have to be here at 4 in the morning. And I was like, don't feel like that's for me. Like, ugh, very different. So that's one thing. So I always get excited. So when I see veterans, and I don't wear any military things, so they don't think I have anything. I was like, I promise you. I was like, I've been in every sector of the military medicine. I got you. Don't you worry. You're in a good place. So
I
that's
love
me.
that. Yeah, that's fantastic. And so, for those that don't know, can you explain what a nurse practitioner is?
Right. Absolutely. So nurse practitioner is a medical provider, a mid-level. And so I have an advanced degree in nursing. So I have an opportunity where I can manage and prescribe and diagnose and treat medical conditions. So in the Army, actually, I think the Army was the ones that created physician assistants, and that was an opportunity where you don't have a medical degree, because but you could get trained and the training's a little bit shorter, but you're still having the same scope of knowledge and treatment capacity, not treatment capacity, I don't want to say that, but in the sense of where you're going to receive the same treatment. You're going to be treated like care, evidence based. That's where I want to go with that. And so the Army does use nurse practitioners as well. So I'm used as like a provider and the management of care of soldiers in the military.
That's awesome. And what advantage does that provide a hospital, whether it's military or civilian?
So that provides more access to care. So there's a huge shortage of medical providers and doctors in the United States. So this was an opportunity where they can reach areas and they really promote for like rural areas. And then it's just really access to care.
That's phenomenal. One of my best buds from Germany, he's going through nursing school now, and that was one of his biggest motivations in choosing that was he wanted to provide access to care. So I love hearing that as a repeating theme. As a captain in the reserves, what is your role like? And then what has your experience taught you about leadership?
So, not having any military background was a little difficult coming in as a captain because you're already seen as a leader. Like you're supposed to have an expectation of knowing and knowledge, and I knew nothing. So that was really difficult where I had to kind of jump in the deep end and kind of a little bit like fake it till I made it. Because the military world, it's a different language. There are acronyms and words and standards that is not intuitive. And it was a little learning curve, actually not a little, a very big learning curve for me to jump in as a captain because most people come in, if you're going to commission, at least it could be a lieutenant, first lieutenant, and I'm just a captain and everyone's saluting me. And I'm like, I have these high enlisted soldiers. I'm like, I should be saluting and curtsying you. Like, this just didn't make sense to me. So that was really a difficult thing for me to adapt and understand. But I know that everything has its purpose and reasoning, and just really utilizing everyone that I knew and asking those questions to really learn, how can I succeed? Because it is important as a captain to set a standard and set an example because my job is to delegate and manage. And it's hard to delegate if you don't even know what you're doing. So you don't know what to delegate if you don't even know what you're supposed to do or what to look for as a standard. So I leaned heavy on my like very knowledgeable enlisted soldiers because they know what to do. Those senior enlisted, those NCOs, those sergeants, they know what they're doing. And those were my like saving grace in the military. Because I think the worst is a commissioned soldier that acts like they know what they're doing and they don't. And that's not fair. Like you need to know your stuff and take the time to educate yourself if you don't.
That's a wonderful answer. I love that. And I mean, I can imagine it was like drinking out of a fire hose.
You have no idea.
And with any new endeavor, especially in our country nowadays, there's a lot of career shifts between the 35 and 48-year demographic. Once people are hitting those ages, they're like, I went to school for this, but I don't like it, or I'm not enjoying it, or I really want to do this. Cool, more power to you. I've done it a few times over the last few years, but when you do that, you have to accept, okay, I'm going to go into a new endeavor and I'm going to have to learn. And I think something you said, which is a resounding theme throughout all of the episodes so far, is ask for help. If you can put your ego aside and say, hey, I don't know or I don't understand, please teach me, educate me. That is such a powerful message.
I mean, I can tell you how like green, like how clueless I was my first drill weekend. I had to do a PT test. So like no one told me like how the things to wear and I was like practicing, just Googling everything I could. And I show up to my first PT test and I forgot my socks. And the only
No.
socks I have are pink socks. And that's all I have. And I tried my best to shove them down my socks, but they pooped out. And this my very close friend now, NCO comes up to me and goes, ma'am, I can see those pink socks and those are out of reg. And I looked at him dead in the eye and I said, I will eat these socks if I need to. And he's like, we're okay. You don't need to eat the socks, but next time, please do not wear pink socks to the PT test. So they're always so kind and like have so much grace and empathy, like kindly tell me like, come on, stupid, you're doing this wrong.
That brings up another point. Justin made this comment a few weeks ago, and it's unmet. How did we say it? When you expect something, but it's not communicated. So they say captain, they assume you've been in for a while, and that's a reasonable expectation. But somebody should have been like, oh, she was in the medical field. She probably hasn't done this. Let me reach out to her and make sure we set her up for success. And There's been a few jobs that I've seen and other people that have experienced where someone in charge was like, "Hey, you're coming in. Here's how we do things. We want to make sure we set you up for success, that when, boots on the ground, you can move in the right direction and not be embarrassed or look silly." Because that's the worst. You're already nervous. You're already hyper aware of everything going around you, and you think people are looking at you. And then something as silly as the color of your socks, which most people aren't going to understand. The color of your socks are very
Everything.
important in the military.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's the first thing I packed after that weekend. I said, "Never again will this happen." I don't own pink socks anymore.
But it's also a good lesson where, if I'm going to reach out and say, "Hey, is there anything I need to know when I show up?" So, job interviews, I always ask what the dress attire is. Uh, Most of the time, it's business casual, but in the event that they don't tell me or I forget to ask, I always just wear a suit. Like, I'd rather be overdressed and underdressed. But, and we'll get into some responsibility talk. It is on us to learn to ask questions ahead of time. And sometimes it takes a fun little incident like that to learn how to ask questions.
I think it happens a lot more also in medical. I
Hmm.
remember an experience that there was a physician that came in. He came in as a full bird. Because his years of experience, and you have this person that has like not full bar, I think it was a lieutenant colonel, something very, I think it was 05. I'm exaggerating on this, but he on his OCPs, he had Army on both sides. He had both of those on. I was like, okay, Mr. Army, like he didn't know anything, like he was totally clueless. But like knowledge wise, like he's a neurosurgeon, he's brilliant. But there's such a massive gap on like DNC and standards in the military, and that's something that is held so highly and like the standard of that what makes us different, but it's not intuitive. You can't just walk in there even though you're the smartest person. You have to learn and grow and be taught.
Absolutely. So you're lucky in that your civilian career overlaps with what you choose to do in the military. But how does balancing your civilian career with your reserve duty sharpen your perspective on both?
Absolutely. I have to say it was a little difficult balancing civilian life and military life, having something that was kind of the 1 weekend a month, but it kind of required more than one weekend.
Hmm.
And then a job that took a lot of time that not only like I didn't finish, I would leave the clinic, but I still had work to take home. So it's finding that balance of like I feel like it always felt like something had to give. Either when I was excelling in my military career, I was failing in my civilian. So that was like I was always felt like I was on a teeter-totter of like where can I be, or if I was going to be average in both. But I didn't want to be average in both. I wanted to
Hmm.
excel and do the best. So that was I feel like that was hard. But when I was active duty and all I had was army, like that was great. I could be all in, and that was the only thought I had. The job itself, even I would say when I was in the military and having to be the nurse practitioner, I was never had roles as a nurse practitioner. Like I was the OIC of SRP of the SRP mission. So there was so many other things like managing the mission, like working with different providers outside of like clinic is easy. I can treat, prescribe, follow evidence-based treatment. That's easy. It's the other stuff of the mission and like the management, the leadership role, like that's very different. So that was something that really took me out of my comfort zone as a nurse practitioner. And I'm very gracious for the military because it taught me how to have hard conversations. It taught me how to be in uncomfortable places and be in a room of people that really make the difference of like what's happening in our country, like being in certain meetings. And when I was overseas, I'm like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Like this is they're talking about a lot of things that this seems way outside of my pay grade, but this is what happens. This is the military will put you in places like that.
I that's one thing I really miss is the opportunity to engage with just some of the smartest, brightest, most influential people our country has to offer. And I've been in your shoes where I'm like, I want to be in that meeting. Like, this is so cool. And then I'm like, why am I here? I look like Rudolph. No, I should not be here. I did active duty, and boy, I was a boo boo face about the reserves and National Guard until much later in my career. It is not easy having to wear two hats. If you're active duty, it's super easy. That's your job. You do it all the time. If you have a dentist appointment, it's part of your workday. If you have a medical appointment, it's part of your workday because they have their reports and, oh, this person missed dentist, this person missed their yearly physical, like someone's
Yeah,
getting in trouble.
like
In the
part of
real world, you're
exercise.
taking PTO.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to find time to work out on your own. You have to find time to go to the doctor. You have to find time to do all the things. Like as when I was active duty, like I worked out 2 times a day. It was great. I loved it. And it was encouraged. It was do it. Like you need it's part of your job. Your job is to be physically fit. In the reserves, it's still my job, but no one's going to make me do it. And there's always, I feel like there's a little bit more time. I'm like, oh, drill's not till next month. And like I have some time for that. And there's never enough time. You always have to like do it. You have to be on all the time, it feels like.
Well, yeah, that's crazy. Um, you've built a career as a nurse practitioner and work closely with veterans getting access to healthcare. Can you expand on that role and how has that given you a unique view of veterans' needs?
Absolutely. So now I work with the comp and pen process, so the CMP, and I do the medical exams for veterans who are applying for VA disability. So during the process, when you put the claim in, the claim process, you submit your claim, and then the next step is where you meet with a medical provider, and then that will be evaluated, looked at your service treatment records, your current medical records, and then from there it's sent back to the VA where the attorneys and raters make the ultimate decision. But it still requires a medical examiner to see the status and severity of the condition.
That's awesome. I remember my own experience. I retired in 2020, so it was during COVID. My Lincy, the person I was in communication with, was incredible. It was all telehealth, so either video chat or over the phone. And I mean, he was like, dude, this is going to take a while. And we
Mhm.
went from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And he was incredible. To have someone like you, like him, to be a champion for someone, because when you're in, all you hear are horror stories. The government's trying to screw you. The VA doesn't care, and you have a pre-built-in bias. And then you meet someone, and they're like, "No, no, I'm here for you."
Yeah. It's and I always and my biggest thing is, like, working with these veterans, like, I think they look at me and they think, like, "You don't know anything, you haven't been through" and you're right, there's gonna be experiences that they've had that I'm never gonna experience, I'm never gonna know. Everyone's military experience is different, but I
Hmm.
have put on the boots on, I have done the parts of it where I'm like, I can understand to a point, and I know what it feels like in that sense, where I wanna encourage and help you to get the most out of this because it's a big change going active duty to the real world, it's a big jump and no one's helping you jump across. Like you have to kind of figure out on your own. Like there's more resources now. I do feel that, but some people like it's a lot. It's hard when you feel stuck to look for the answers versus difficult.
I love that you mention it because you see it firsthand that the transition out is difficult, which is the whole premise of the book and this season of the podcast. But then you also follow it up with there are systems, processes, and support in place. Off the top of your head, what would be one, two, or three of those things that veterans can access?
So, biggest thing on there. So, my transition's a little different. I reservist wise. So, my like transition information, and I think also a hard thing is too when you're leaving, they kind of bombard you with information overload. So, the exit process alone, they are sharing information, but sometimes when you're receiving so much, like you said, like a fire hose, you're like, I can't take all this in. Like, you're like, I'll just look at that later, and it's paperwork, power. Like, it's so much information, you don't even know what to do with it. Biggest thing utilizing with the VA is we have the VSO, like veteran service officers, that can be as a resource. Also using the nonprofit organizations like your American Legion, your VFW, working with those experienced people that have gone through the process, are familiar with the process, and just asking around. Because once you start asking, you start realizing that people have the same question. And you just have to keep asking. And I really truly believe in the military and in life, there's no such thing as a no. You just haven't asked the right person that knows the yes. So you just have to keep asking because there's someone out there that knows the answer and just be curious.
Oh, I love that. And be curious, not judgmental. Hashtag Ted Lasso, greatest TV show ever.
Mhm.
I love that you mentioned that. It's not no. You're either not asking the right question or you're not asking the right person, or it could be a combination of both. But don't stop. Don't just because you get a no doesn't mean it's final. Okay, if you were uh, on the table for an experimental surgery or drug, you probably wouldn't go with the first doctor. Oh, you should do this. Oh, yes, sir, I'll do that. Right, like you might get a second opinion. You might get a third opinion. It's the same thing. Okay, well, this person said no. Okay, can you refer me to somebody else? Or, wow, check the Google machine. It's kind of a we have more access to information than any other point in history. Look it up. Do a little bit of legwork, and you talked about it earlier. We're kind of handheld through a lot of stuff. And it's time to put your big boy and big girl pants on and be an adult and do some research yourself.
And that's a big thing as I do see individuals as veterans. A lot of people go in at 18 years old, so they're coming from high school, they're coming from their family unit where those things are still like in high school, you're told where to go. These are my classes, I do this. You're just kind of on like autopilot. No one, you're not really making your own autonomous choices in life still. You're a kid, you know? And then you go to another area where it's kind of just like older people you're around that are still kind of telling you where to go. You're led everywhere. This is the time you have to be here. You have to do this. And you're still told what to do, and then you're supposed to you do that for 20 years, and then you get out and don't realize you're like, there's no one else telling me what to do. No one else telling me to show up. I could because we're human beings. Have the right to not wake up. We can just stay in bed. We don't have to do anything. We have free will. But we have to get up. We have to do those things. We have to go to work. And it's a night and day switch. You know, you go from being told to do this to like no one's telling me anything. And I think they deal with a lot of frustration. I feel they feel abandoned. They feel kind of like they have a victim mindset. They're like, why me? Why has no one helped me? No one showed me what to do. And unfortunately, in the civilian world, that just doesn't exist.
Hmm.
A lot of kids leave high school, and if they don't go to the military, they just have to figure it out. And I think those people went through the fire a lot earlier, and they had less to deal with. They didn't have the families, they didn't have anything. It's just this 18-year-old kid just trying to figure out the world, and they kind of transitioned a little faster. Well, you're an adult now. Most people have a family and kids, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like you got left out there, and it's a very feeling of abandonment.
Absolutely. I always describe the military as the most toxic relationship on the planet because when it's good, there is nothing better. And when it's bad, it sucks really bad. But one thing the military does, I mean, it provides you purpose, direction, motivation, be in the right time at the right place in the right uniform, and you really can't mess up. And whether you did 2 years or 40 years, whether you're enlisted, warrant, or an officer, chances are when you do re-enter the civilian workforce, you're going to start behind the eight ball because you've been in such a structured environment. And it's not that you're a mindless robot and don't know how to think for yourself. You're used to the systems and processes in place. And as you get out, it's very difficult to shift from that mindset into the dog eat dog world where it's not that they don't care, but like you said, it's figure it out.
And it goes vice versa too. Like if you think about it, when people come in older into the military, they have a
Hmm.
hard time simulating to it because they're used to doing their own thing. And when everyone else around there's like, no, you can't do that. And they're like, why not? And you're like, because you
Hmm.
can't. Like they're like, as I going in as an adult, it was really hard to like accept that like I need to put my autonomous thoughts kind of in the back burner and think of the collective and follow the leadership of what they're telling me because like in the real world I'm like no that doesn't make sense to me because I can't see the big picture because I'm only in my small world and I had to change to that and that was very hard to change for that. So both ways can go be difficult, so switching from that like structured world to this kind of like more open free will world, going from a free willed world to going to a structured world is also difficult.
Yeah. And it's so funny. The three-letter word why, it can cause so much grief, whether you're in the military or in the real world. In the military, my dad raised me saying, challenge conventional wisdom and thinking. So I said why a lot, not because I was a smartass or because I was being insubordinate. I wanted to know, like, I don't want the mile wide, inch thick answer. I want the roots. Tell me why. Like, help me understand why we do something. Once I understand why, boom, I'm all in. You have me forever. And then the same thing I've experienced in civilian workplace when you ask somebody why, you're in the military, you think you know everything. No, I was in the military and I understand that way better than I understand this. So if you can tell me why, I can be way more productive for you.
I think it's important to have that like why question too, because sometimes that process isn't the best. And bringing up the why helps the introduction of the conversation of like, maybe there is another way to do this. Is this safer? And like, that's why the military
Hmm.
has positioned and progressed is because of those people asking why or what if? Is there another way? We're not stuck in a certain way. We don't have to do something forever, but it takes that one person to be like, hey, like, let's sit and have a conversation about this. Let's look at the bigger picture.
Oh, yeah. So it is blatantly obvious that you care a lot about other people, and you know, known you for a few years, and I've seen you interact with people, and I hear conversations from Caitlin. Like, you pour so much into other people. How do you manage your own well being?
I think it took a really long time to really understand kind of what truly resets me. Like, it's kind of like every person's a little different. Some people are more extroverted, more some people are more introverted, and it's really was learning what works for me as a person. I'm a more introverted person, and I have to really listen to myself, be like, "Okay, I'm overextending myself. I need to take it back. I need to take some time for myself to recharge." Some people recharge with other people, and that's how they get their energy from them. Some people need that, like, downtime, and I'm a very big downtime person and really into I personally like doing things like self-care stuff. So that's where I bring my joy and get centered myself to find like back to where I'm at. I've learned as I get older, I really like to do paint by numbers. It's like the silliest thing, but I've never felt more at peace and calm. But I need to find my hobbies, my moments to have an outlet from the chaos because you can't be at 100 all the time. Like you've got to, our body is like a machine. We have to let it, we've got to do the tune ups.
Oh, I love that. At some point, you're going to take the uniform off for the last time. Some people welcome it, some people dread it. I was definitely the latter. What are your feelings regarding that? Do you anticipate any struggles with identity, purpose, or connection?
I think for me, looking at myself younger when I got in, I was in more of my early 30s. And now that I'm in my late 30s, heading closer to 40, you kind of, as a woman, you have to kind of make a choice of like, am I going to focus on the military or am I going to focus on a family? And unfortunately, it's kind of, it's hard to do both at the same time. It's kinda having to make that choice because you have to have the time to give and, like so now I feel like my perspective has changed and where my wants are, and I feel almost a sense of time losing time because there's a small window where that's gonna be gone, and parts of me is, like, grasping to the last little bit of that opportunity of having a family of my own because I ignored it because I was focused on other things. So I think maybe at a different time, if I took the uniform off a little bit earlier, I would be very different. But I feel very comfortable with the future decisions of when it comes off because I really just want to be in a really good headspace and a really healthy mental space for having a family.
Oh, I love that. One of the key themes of this season's podcast is when service members get out, it's the blind leading the blind.
Mhm.
You have a passion for translating military medicine into practical, compassionate care. And 2 episodes back, I talked about the need for us as veterans to take responsibility and be more proactive in all facets of our lives. But for you specifically, what does that look like in your realm, especially with regards to VA claims?
Yeah. Um, One of the biggest things I see, I feel as a common theme is people have a very big fear and have a very bad perspective of the VA itself. Immediately, even before even enrolling, they're like, the VA is terrible. And I'm like, have you gone? Like, no. So I think you have to allow your own experience to guide that journey versus of what the rumors and everything you've heard of from other people because the VA is constantly changing. It's not the same VA as 50 years ago. It's a totally different world, and they're constantly trying to better themselves. Is there a perfect solution in any sector, like civilian or military? No, there's not. But also, there's military members and veterans also have an opportunity to access to care that people not in the military do not have
Hmm.
access. And that's huge. Like, I don't I worked civilian and I worked military medicine, I worked VA medicine, so I've seen it all, and the things I could get covered for my veterans, I could never get covered for the civilian sector, and there's so many resources, and it's kinda one of those things, there's almost too many resources because you don't even know what to do. It's like too many choice overload is also a bad thing too.
Hmm.
So it's like there's so many things and you don't even know what to do with it, but it's that access to care that many people do not have. And I do always encourage is that mental health aspect. Like, I could never get any mental health covered for any of my civilian patients. And here they are just open. They're wanting to help. There's resources, there's different ways to receive. You can do video, you can do in person, you can do group. Like, they have tried because everyone's different. I don't think everyone receives information and care the same way. You've got to find the right shoe that fits. And people think once they go to the VA, they're kind of stuck. Like, this is all I have. No, like, there are patient advocates, there's opportunities, like, you can have a voice. You're not stuck to anything. And they're built for our type of, I want to say, like, trauma. It's different. The civilian sector is not going to see the same things that they see on a regular with military medicine. And I think that it's, in order to be a healthy, autonomous adult in society, like, you've got to take that step to be healthy, mind, body, and soul. Like, you got to do all the parts. Like, you can fake it for a while, but the body just gives up. And when it gives up, like, you can't like cheat through it. Like, it's just going to give up without you. And it's too late.
But yeah, if you don't take care of your body now, if it's not a priority now, it's going to be the only priority 20, 30, 40 years from now. And you're
Yeah,
going to wish you had spent
yeah.
some time talking to someone, being seen, maybe have a bit of an inconvenient day or week with appointments. So you're not spending every day in a hospital or with a provider because you neglected to do it when you were young.
And I always encourage, some people do have, every experience is not going to be great going to the VA. It's like every experience going to Walmart. It's not amazing. I've had great experiences going to Walmart and I've had really terrible ones. But I keep going to Walmart and I keep getting all the things I need. And always has all the stuff I want. And it's typically open 24 hours a day, you know? So I always encourage people, like, don't let the one bad experience stop you from getting better. And that's why they have the patient advocate. They have where you can submit concerns, and that's how changes get made. So if no one says anything, nothing's going to change. And you have the right that if you don't feel comfortable with your provider, you can change providers. And they do switch providers on you, but a lot of people don't know, like, if you like your provider, you can stay with your provider. You just have to ask. They do switch the panels up to make it even. So sometimes you may lose this, because I hear a lot, like, I have a different provider every time. I'm like, well, if you like your provider, you can ask to stay with them. But they don't ask that. They don't know that's even an option.
Before we started, you mentioned that too many veterans receive a rating, but they don't engage in treatment, and then they cycle through their CNP exams hoping for a new outcome. Can you explain what a CNP exam is and maybe provide um, a way forward when that does happen?
Absolutely. So a lot of times I see veterans show up to CMP exams thinking that's kind of where treatment starts. And I don't think they realize that's the exam to get care. So that's a step needed to evaluate and see what issues can the VA continue to assist and manage. And a lot of them go in there thinking, okay, what's wrong with me? And that's not where it goes. It's, this is the problem and I'm looking backwards. I'm not looking to treat and move forward. This is gonna give you the key to care, and a lot of people they'll get the rating, and they never actually take the next step to enroll in benefits, and I will see the same person keep coming to the CMP exams and reporting that I'm in pain, everything's horrible, everything. I'm like, "Well, have you gone to the doctor?" And they're like, "No," and I'm like, it's really hard to have empathy for someone that's saying that they're 10 out of 10 pain, and they're doing their worst, and they feel horrible, and life is horrible, when you have free access to healthcare. Like, it's right there. Like, all you had to do was to show up, and they keep showing up, getting worse and worse. And the VA is going to look at you and be like, you had this here. What happened? Why did you not get the care you needed? And it's hard to, like, you're going to be stuck. You're going to be stuck in this. You keep going to get worse and not getting better, but you have to go and enroll in the benefits. You have to make an appointment. You have to do that step. And that step, I feel like a lot of people miss out on. Like, I've talked to veterans and, like, I didn't even know that's what it was. I didn't even know the VA, you get healthcare. I had no idea. They just think it's a rating, and
Hmm.
they that paycheck each month. I'm like, no, you have access to care. You can feel better. Like, you don't have to feel like this your whole life. I always related to them. I was like, I had one community that I lived in, and I had the HOA, and I paid for my cable. And I had no idea this whole time that I had free cable, all the movie channels, everything. And I was paying for cable on my own. And I just didn't know, because I never, like, read the things that my HOA offered, because I didn't bother, because I had everything else in my life. I was like, I could have had free cable. I could have had all these movie channels. And that's kind of like, it's on me. It's not like it wasn't there. It's not like they didn't show it to me. I just didn't take the step. So who do I have to blame? It's me. I'm the only one I can blame. I can't blame them that they gave me free cable and they didn't set it up for me at my house.
Absolutely. And I think we've clearly identified that, there's a lot of onus on the individual, the veteran, when it comes to being educated and seeking out care. But do you see any gaps in how we currently care for veterans?
In what sense? I'm sorry, I'm kind of a little confused on that one.
So, like you said earlier, not every organization's perfect. So, the VA or just general healthcare, like we're not trying to poo poo on anybody, but in your professional experience, do you see any gaps with how we treat veterans, like how we can provide care or treatment?
I think it's hard because we are a big population and it's such a big group of people to help and the resources are limited. Like here in Phoenix, Arizona, we've got the one VA hospital.
Hmm.
They are constantly creating ways on access of care, more rural areas and how they can meet the needs of that. But it is hard. There's not enough providers for enough veterans. We have so many veterans and the problem is also, I believe that our veterans are exposed to things that are different than the civilian sector. We have exposure to Agent Orange. We have exposure to burn pits. We are a sicker population. We have higher like medical problems, and it's such a multifactorial thing. So we have the mental health component. We've got the exposure to toxins, and then we have to kind of like figure out this system that's really big. So it's kind of like a catalyst storm to like. It's hard to be successful in it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking on the shortage of providers, whether I lived in Michigan or when I moved here, I'm on USA Jobs every couple weeks looking at stuff, and there's always a need for some sort of medical professional at every VA. And it's just astounding to me that, as you mentioned, we're a huge population. I think we exceeded 1 million total veterans just through the global war on terror over 20 years.
Mhm.
We were, I think, a fraction of a percent of the population at the start. And I think we're up to 4% of the population now. It's just, it's crazy. And I just talking out loud, I wonder why it's so difficult for um, the VA or a government entity to find medical professionals.
I mean, there's different parts I believe in, but I do think it is a higher burnout because the
Mm,
patients are really sick. Like, I remember my first civilian job working in primary care, I, had my sick patients. They had a lot of different diagnosis and it was difficult, but they were easy to manage. I was getting patients in like stage 4 cancers the first time I'm meeting them and all these multiple things. Amount of cancers I feel like I diagnosed like the first week going to the VA, it's a lot. And not only are these patients have very difficult diagnosis, like they're the zebras. These are the ones that like the medical books are written about because they have the exposures. And then you have such a high pain component, and then you have mental health. And I hate to say it too, is majority of the veterans are male, and those are actually the hardest to get into healthcare. They're the hardest to
absolutely.
verbalize needs. They're the hardest to, and it's tough. And I think it's also goes back to what they're bred and like trained to do is like you suck it up. There's nothing wrong. You get back into work. You just do it. So they're already trained to ignore those problems. And then these problems present, they get hyper focused on the wrong problem. Like I would have some people focusing on things. I was like, look, this is not the main focus for the visit. Like we have a lot of other things that we need to cover. And it's hard to fix them all in one visit. Cause I remember I would have patients, I'm like, you're a 30 problem patient. Like we are gonna have multiple visits. Like we can't fix it all. And they're hyper focused on the wrong thing. I was like, I need to treat you the thing that's gonna kill you today, not the thing that you're worried about right now. And I think that is a hard thing. It's unfortunately because of that male population and being taught that there's nothing wrong with you. You need to keep the mission first. And then so that shift is harder to realize like I need to listen to my body and I need to ask for help and I need to get help. And you're not going to get in trouble for asking for help.
Now, that's a fantastic point. And you talked about the male population. I want to flip the script on you. Being a woman in the military is not for the faint of heart. As you mentioned, it is a male dominated profession by and large. What would you tell a young lady or a young woman who is considering joining the military?
I will say for myself, I did have a little bit of a different perspective because I am medical. So I am surrounded by more female population, and we're kind of a little bit not protected, but it's just different. I would be in units where there was multiple women. Like I had a strong force of women with me, and I had mentors and resources. So mine is a little bit different, but working with when I was in, and I would talk to someone that was with, you know, the only female in a combat engineer unit, and she's the only one. She doesn't have anyone to talk to and be like, hey, I started my menstrual period. Do you have anything? There's no one there. You're on your own. I know that sounds very, being graphic, but like really there's things that the men cannot help you. They don't understand. You don't have anyone to talk to. So I feel like the advice I have, I've had a different experience because I did have mentors, I did have support, but you really have to have that voice. You have to have that gut. You have to put yourself in situations that you feel safe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And no matter the unit, it doesn't matter where there's going to be good people, bad people. Learn how to identify people of good moral character and that you can, there's going to be a husband, there's going to be a father, there's going to be a brother who had three, four, five sisters and gets it. But yeah, it's boy, it's so tough. As an MP, we had a lot of females. We were one of the first MOSs with females. The best platoon sergeant I had was a female. One of the best company commanders I had was female, and they were almost harder on the women soldiers because they kind of came up in the old school and like they had to prove themselves. But at the same time, they were very good mama bears and would pull them off to the side or have almost a female engagement conversations to make sure, like you mentioned, like here's how you take care of yourself, especially if we're in the field or if we're deployed, like so you don't have to be alone or awkward.
And I think women soldiers also need to, I think you're thinking of like, I'm not good enough because I'm not like my male counterparts. But I think they need to also remember and lean in on their strengths as being a woman. Like
Hmm.
there's something that you bring to the table that these men cannot. You have a different intuition, you have a different perspective, and it all works together. And that those different perspectives in experiences is how we succeed as a military, as a unit. And I think learning that like I am different, but different's not bad. Different is strength. Different is bringing a stronger force and leaning in on those things, saying, not thinking that I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough. No, you have a built different, yes, but those different parts will help. And you don't know when it's going to happen or how you can make a difference, but there's a reason for utilizing both male and females in this kind of collective.
Absolutely. I mean, Kay, you walked down the aisle with him when Caitlin and I got married. He would not have been a good tunnel rat in Vietnam. He's 6'4", 250, just solid beef out of Montana. Um, I remember I and our platoon sergeant, before we deployed to Afghanistan, um, our battalion didn't have its mission statement yet because we were a BSTB, a Brigade Special Troops Battalion. So you have a commo company, an engineer company, an MI company, and then the HHC, which has MPs, CBRN, and then the headquarters staff. We went around to the different battalions and shopped our platoon because we had female soldiers and we were going to Afghanistan and we knew we can do a lot of kinetic stuff, but if you want to reach the populace, you have to be able to speak to the women. And
Absolutely.
we knew our most important asset was actually our female soldiers. We made sure every female soldier was air assault qualified, and we got them to sharpshooting training, not sniper, but they got to shoot M14s and be advanced marksmen, if you will. And they were trained in all the weapons platforms, the vehicles. They were very, very proficient in everything, and we could go talk to maybe some village elders and we could send them off with a lieutenant or a captain and go talk to the women. So we were able to use a multi-pronged approach when we had to go into a hotspot.
100%. I think people forget like being in the military, you're like in the most extreme group project. And you don't
Yeah,
want everyone to be great at references and no one knows how to actually like put a PowerPoint together. Like you want someone great in all the parts of it. And that's how you're like have a successful group project. Not everyone's a leader. Not everyone's meant to be a leader. And I think that sometimes we forget in the military because we're taught to be leaders. But we need also the yes people. There's all parts to succeed. We can't all wear the same hat. And then that's when I think that is like learning what are you good at and leaning into that.
Absolutely. When I was getting out or my last couple years, they brought back retention control points, and I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. I think the army in general, and I don't know how the other branches do it, but the army used to have specialist ranks. So you'd be a spec 4, you could be a spec 5, spec 6. Like they were just like you said, not everyone wants to be a leader. And when I
No.
ran the desk at Fort
Well,
Bragg, I had I had some of my guys and girls loved their job. They had no ambition to go to the promotion board. They didn't want the burden of responsibility, but they were great at their job, but they were looked at as turds because they didn't want to promote. I'm like, no one wants this job. They actually want this job and they're good at it. Why are we trying to force them to do something that isn't going to benefit them, which is ultimately not going to benefit the unit, which won't benefit the mission? I really would like to bring back that spec rank, and you can do 20 years, be a spec 4, spec 5. That's that senior middle enlisted person who they know the skeletons. They know, why is this door locked? Oh, well, back in 2014, this happened and then this person left. And really, there's no key for it. Like they know everything.
yeah, no, I agree. And I've always felt that like looking at the military kind of model is that, like, for example, for like as a reservist, like in order to promote, like you have to be a commander. And I don't feel like
Hmm.
everyone's built to be a commander. Like there are certain people that are like they're just meant to be commanders and they are life teachers and they inspire and they move mountains and that's just where they're meant to be. But if you're told to be in a position, like that puts a lot of lives at risk because that command position is not just a box to be filled. Like you need to have this commanding position. You need to have this aura of like where your unit feels safe. Unit feels that they can depend on you. And if you're doing it just to check a box or because that's what I'm told to do, it can put a lot of people in danger, I feel like. So I feel like there's nothing wrong with the little parts. Those little parts are necessary like our human body, like we don't just have a brain, we've got kidneys, we've got all these other parts. All of it
Yeah.
works together. And when one of them fails, the whole thing fails. So that's always one thing that I felt in the military that like the little jobs always got poo-pooed or like you weren't good enough
Hmm.
because you weren't like the high speed, like you weren't this PT stud, but like you could have been really good at IT. Like you could have been really good in computers. Like there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. We need you. Because everyone knows when the computer goes down, like, oh, the mission's over, we go home. Like, we need everyone to have their special skill set and shine.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think we're tapping into a really cool conversation. I think I want to have you back on and dive into some of that. You're in a very transformational period in your life, professionally and personally. As you look forward, what does Lindsay want her legacy to be?
My legacy. Mm, I think my goal is just to impact and inspire as many people as I can. You just never know the difference of lives you can make and change because you never know who's watching, you never know who's observing. And I feel like it's one of the things the military has taught me is to stand up for what's right, fight for what I need, and fight for others. And I want to continue that spirit and into after the military life and have that. There's something about being in the military that it just gives you this like strength, and you're like, no,
Mhm.
this is what we need to do. This is what's right, and like this pride in our country and what we have. Like, there's something to fight for, and I want to fight for the people that don't have the courage or ready to share their voice.
I love that. Can you expand just a little bit, like maybe provide an example or how you see that
Yeah.
coming to fruition?
I feel that there's a lot of times that we think that we're just a number in the military, like, it doesn't matter, we're like, "My I'm not gonna make a difference, I'm not gonna make a change." But it's those little things that do make a difference. I mean, I'll make a small example that I you don't think you can make a change difference. So when I was in Kuwait, there is an I salute for, the bone marrow and they didn't have that in place at Camp Fearing where I was at. And I had talked to a few people, and I was able to implement the bone marrow registry in Camp Fearing, and that was something that was never done. And through that opportunity, we were able to register over, like, 1,000 soldiers, and that, you know, snowball effect is now has chances to save someone's life. I don't know, it maybe did, I don't know, but it just takes one person to make a difference. And it wasn't a big thing. I didn't, donate my bone marrow. I didn't, do surgery on someone, but I started the process that potentially I could have helped somebody else. So you never know the small things that you do later on down the road can make a difference. So it may not seem like anything's happening right now, and you're like, I'm nothing's changing, it's going on, but you could be that first step that inspires the person to do the movement.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Not a big fan of Steve Jobs, but he did say the ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. That's just such a valid point. I love that. No one's too small or quote unquote unimportant to not affect change. As we close up here, if you had the ear of a service member, whether young or they're getting ready to get out, whatever it is, what would be your advice?
Biggest thing going through the process of the transitioning and exiting, I always tell people when they're getting to that frustrated point where they feel that they're alone, they want to give up, they don't want to do it anymore. I always say, take a break, take a couple days off, and then go back into it. I said, because in the end, you're the only one that's going to reap the repercussions of that. The world's going to keep moving, VA is going to keep moving, military is going to keep moving, but just take a couple days off and then go again. You don't have to get all of the to-do list done in one day. And sometimes breaking it up makes it easier because it can be overwhelming. There are a lot of steps, and it's okay to take a couple days off to kind of recenter yourself and kind of, you know, frago the plan. But I always say that, like, don't get frustrated because the first time around, you've got this laundry list of things and you didn't get it all done. And you're like, and then you just throw it all away and you're like, forget it. I'm not going to even bother. So just take a couple days off, do your self care, and then try again. And if that second time doesn't work out, then try again. Because
I love, I'm sorry.
all it's going to help is you're the only person that it's going to benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a little joke going around on social media where they're talking about how people get burnout and they're like, Jonah, um he was so faithful to God and he was crying out to God and being really upset and God basically told him, eat a snack and take a nap. And after he did, he felt much better. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just taking a knee, pulling security, and focusing on yourself for a little.
And the biggest thing I think I've heard, there's kind of a thought process now. It's like only 1% a day. Just try to get 1% a little bit better every day. And then that's how you'll get to that 100%. And if that 1% is you logged into your email, you didn't read any emails. Hey, but guess what? You logged in. That sometimes is the hardest part for military members is getting past the login. And then that's good. Tomorrow you try again. But guess what? You did more than most people. So that does make a big difference.
It really does. And I mentioned this 2 weeks ago on when in between guests that 1% is 14 minutes and 24 seconds out of your day. And getting 1% better at something over the course of a year means you're going to improve by 30%.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So whether it's your relationship, your job, your health, learning how to play musical instrument, whatever, you can get 30% better by spending 15 minutes a day on it,
I would put all my money in that ROI.
right? Who doesn't want 30% a year?
Yeah. For
We
real.
did we did that in the stock market, it'd be crazy.
Mhm. So just 1%, like little just baby steps. I think that's my biggest thing I tell for people in the process and the journey is just and be proud of yourself for that 1%. Don't be like, "Oh, I just did that." Like, you did that. Good. I did that. That's great. I'm really proud of myself because guess what you could have done? You could have just laid in bed and been upset and angry and blame everyone else. No, I did that. That's good for today. As Babe said, "That'll do, pig."
Absolutely. Lindsay, you've been just a delight. You shared so much information with us. What a tremendous resource for veterans, for women, just anybody listening. Thank you for being a champion and supporter of veterans, being a veteran yourself. I'm looking forward to having you on and catching up with you here in the near future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a pleasure. I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking I might need to get into DJing because these last two episodes have been absolute bangers. I'm out here producing hits on 95.5 on your FM dial. Lindsay, what an incredible conversation. I know you were a little nervous before we jumped on, but man, you did just such a great job. What a treasure what a treasure trove of information and insight. I really appreciate you taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to come onto the podcast and just knock one out of the park. I think the biggest takeaways are, stop with the predetermined negative bias with regards to the VA, healthcare, and treatment. There are resources available. And here's takeaway number two: you have to seek it out, you have to be proactive. There's no door to door salesman or conscience, if you will, saying, hey, are you taking advantage of the resources available to you? And the third, and in my opinion, the most important, is the theme of being selfless. If you're struggling with purpose, identity, or connection, stop looking at yourself and start looking at others. How can I help someone else? How can I serve someone else? And if you're listening right now and you're struggling, or you know someone who is, listen, you are not alone. Call 988, reach out to someone you trust, find a fountain. Your story isn't finished yet, and the world is better with you in it. Thank you for listening to the Enduring Mindset podcast. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague who might need it. And give us a follow on Instagram, Threads, and X at enduring underscore mindset underscore enterprise. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.